A corrupt judge laughs at a black woman's accent, thinking she's an incompetent public defender. But that judge, a man who saw himself as a king, just made the biggest mistake of his career. He has no idea he's speaking to the new federal prosecutor assigned to destroy him. This is the story of how one man's bigotry and arrogance led to his complete and total public annihilation. The courtroom of Judge Arthur Vance is not a place of justice. It is a kingdom. A cold, mahogany-paneled fiefdom where the air itself seems to genuflect before the men on the bench. The wood is dark, polished to a mirror shine, reflecting the distorted faces of the accused. The American flag to his right and the state flag to his left are not symbols of liberty, they are the battle standards of his personal army, flanking his throne. He is a man carved from granite and prejudice, his face a permanent sneer held in place by decades of unchallenged authority. His robe is not black, it is the color of a starless night, an abyss into which hope disappears. When he wields his gavel, the sound is not a call to order but the crack of a whip. Today, his gaze, cold as a mortician's slab, falls upon a young man named David Carter. David is 20 years old, but in the oppressive shadow of the courtroom, he looks closer to 12. He is drowning in a suit borrowed from his uncle, a suit that smells of mothballs and forgotten dreams. His shoulders are slumped not from guilt, but from the crushing weight of a system designed to see him fail. He is a ghost before he has even had a chance to live, a statistic waiting to be written. Beside him sits Sarah Jenkins, the public defender. She is young, earnest, her briefcase filled with ideals that are wilting under the heat of Judge Vance's contempt. Her hands tremble slightly as she shuffles her papers, the flimsy shield of legal precedent against the dragon on the bench. She believes in the law, a faith that this room is engineered to extinguish. Judge Vance leans forward, his voice a low growl that slithers through the microphone. "Mr. Carter," he says, the title dripping with a sarcasm so thick it is almost a physical substance. "You are charged with armed robbery. A serious offense. One that tells me a great deal about your character, or lack thereof." He doesn't look at the file. He doesn't need to. In his kingdom, the story is always the same. Sarah Jenkins stands, her voice a reedy whisper. "Your Honor, my client pleads not guilty. We have evidence, an alibi." Vance waves a dismissive hand, a king swatting away a gnat. "Evidence," he scoffs. "I'm sure you do, counsel. Let me guess. He was at his mother's house. Or perhaps at church." The alibis for men like him are always so predictable. The insult hangs in the air, a toxic cloud. He is not just judging David Carter, he is judging every young black man who has ever stood in that spot. He is passing sentence on a whole community, a whole history. In the back of the courtroom, a woman sits alone. She is still, a portrait of calm in a sea of anxiety. She wears a simple, unassuming dress, the kind that blends into the wooden benches. Her hands are folded in her lap. Her name is Maya Jackson, and she is watching. Listening. She is not just an observer. She is a cartographer, mapping the geography of this rotten kingdom, noting every crack in its foundation, every stain on its walls. To anyone who glances her way, she is nobody. A relative, perhaps. A concerned citizen. She is invisible. And in her invisibility, she finds her greatest strength. She hears the judge's words, feels their sting as if they were directed at her, and a cold, quiet fire begins to burn in her chest. A fire that will soon consume this entire corrupt edifice. The proceedings are a farce, a piece of theater where the conclusion has been written long before the curtain rose. Sarah Jenkins, bless her heart, tries to mount a defense. She is a lone soldier charging a fortress. "Your Honor, we have time-stamped security footage showing Mr. Carter at his part-time job at the library during the time of the robbery," she pleads, her voice gaining a sliver of confidence from the certainty of her evidence. She holds up a DVD case. It's conclusive. Judge Vance barely glances at it. He steeples his fingers, a parody of thoughtful contemplation. "The library," he muses, a cruel smile playing on his lips. "How studious. And how convenient. Tell me, counsel, is it a color video? Or does everything just look black and white to you?" The court-appointed prosecutor, a weasel of a man named Marcus Thorne who owes his entire career to Vance, snickers audibly. The sound echoes in the cavernous room, a chorus of complicity. Thorne is a jackal who feeds on the scraps from the lion's kill. "Your Honor, That is an inappropriate and biased line of questioning, Sarah stammers, her face flushing with a mixture of anger and fear. Bias. Vance booms, his voice suddenly a thunderclap. I'll tell you what bias is, Miss Jenkins. It's the bias of a bleeding heart public defender who sees a thug and tries to paint him as a scholar. The only library a man like him is familiar with is the one in a prison cell. Motion to admit your little home movie is denied. The chain of custody is questionable. But it was provided by the police themselves in discovery. Sarah protests, her voice cracking. Then their chain of custody is questionable, Vance retorts, slamming his gavel down. Sit down, counsel, before I hold you in contempt. You are wasting this court's time with your sentimental nonsense. Sarah Jenkins sinks into her chair, defeated. The air has been sucked out of her lungs. She looks at David Carter, whose face is now a mask of pure despair. He had held onto that video footage as his last, best hope. And with a single sentence, the king had declared it worthless. The system wasn't just broken, it was an active, malevolent force. Vance leans forward again, his eyes locking onto David. The smile is gone, replaced by a chilling look of predatory satisfaction. He is an emperor in the Colosseum, about to give the thumbs down. Let me be clear with you, son, he says, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that carries to every corner of the room. I look at you, and I see a menace. A drain on society. The best I can do for the good people of this city is to put you away for a long, long time. I'm thinking 20 years. Maybe 25, to be safe. It will give you plenty of time to catch up on your reading. This is it. The raw, undisguised cruelty. He is not threatening a defendant with a sentence. He is threatening a young man's entire future, his very life, with a casual, dismissive flick of his wrist. It is a promise of total ruin, delivered with the smug certainty of a man who has never known consequences. Sarah Jenkins makes a small, choked sound. The world seems to tilt on its axis. The weight of it all, the injustice, the blatant racism, her own powerlessness, crashes down on her. Her vision blurs. The judge's face swims before her eyes, a grotesque caricature of power. And then, everything goes black. She slumps sideways in her chair, a quiet collapse, the final surrender. A bailiff rushes to her side. There is a commotion. David Carter reaches for her, his face a canvas of alarm. Ma'am. Miss Jenkins. Judge Vance watches the scene with utter detachment, as if observing a mildly inconvenient spill on his pristine floor. He sighs, a sound of profound theatrical boredom. Bailiff, get her some water. And get him, he says, pointing a rigid finger at David, back in holding. This court is in recess until we can find counsel who isn't prone to such histrionics. He is about to bang the gavel, to end the scene, to sweep the pieces off the board. But then, a voice cuts through the chaos. It is a clear, calm voice, with a warmth and a cadence that seems utterly alien in this cold, sterile room. It has the gentle roll of a southern drawl, the melodic rhythm of a church hymn. Your Honor, if I may. Every head turns. The voice comes from the back of the courtroom, from the woman in the simple dress. Maya Jackson is standing. She has risen not with a dramatic flourish, but with a quiet, deliberate grace. She seems to have drawn all the light in the room to herself. Judge Vance squints, his eyes unaccustomed to challenges from the gallery. And who in God's name are you, he demands, his irritation palpable. Maya takes a slow walk down the central aisle, her sensible shoes making almost no sound on the tiled floor. She stops at the bar that separates the public from the court. My name is Maya Jackson, Your Honor. I believe the defendant is in need of representation. Vance leans back, a slow, predatory grin spreading across his face. He has found a new target for his venom, a new insect to crush under his thumb. He sizes her up, the simple dress, the calm demeanor, and most of all, the accent. To him, that accent is a sign of weakness, of ignorance. It is the sound of the uneducated, the unimportant. Miss Jackson, he says, drawing out her name as if it were a joke. Well now, it seems the good Lord has sent us a replacement. Though I must confess, I'm not sure from which side of the Mason-Dixon line he sent ya. He chuckles. Marcus Thorne, the prosecutor, joins in on cue. Maya's expression does not change. She remains a pillar of serenity. I was born in Atlanta, Your Honor. Raised in Savannah. Savannah, Vance repeats, savoring the word. Well, that explains it. Tell me, Miss Jackson, did you get your law degree from a catalog? Or did you just watch a few episodes of Matlock down on the farm? Because I can tell you right now, we speak the king's English in this courtroom. Not whatever dialect you're peddling. The humiliation is public, deliberate, and vicious. He isn't just attacking her, he is attacking her home, her heritage, her very identity. He is using her voice as a weapon against her, attempting to strip her of her dignity word by word. He wants to see her flinch. He wants to see her crumble, just like Sarah Jenkins did. But Maya does not flinch. She does not crumble. The cold fire in her chest grows hotter, refined now into a blade of pure, focused intent. This is the moment. The line has not just been crossed, it has been vaporized. He has handed her the very tool of his own destruction. I assure you, Your Honor, Maya says, her voice still even, still calm, but now with an underlying edge of steel. My credentials are quite in order. I highly doubt that, Vance sneers. He lifts his gavel. Now, I am going to hold you in contempt of my court if you do not sit down and shut your mouth. The next time you speak in this room, it will be from a holding cell. Do I make myself clear, Missy? He raises the gavel high, ready to bring it down, to silence her, to reassert his absolute, unquestionable power. The sound he is expecting, the sharp crack of wood on wood, is drowned out by a much louder one. Boom. Boom. The heavy double doors at the back of the courtroom are thrown open with such force that they slam against the walls, the sound reverberating like a cannon shot. Framed in the doorway are two figures. They are tall, broad-shouldered men in impeccably tailored dark suits. They wear no expression. They radiate an aura of authority that is not theatrical or inherited, it is absolute and federal. Earpieces are coiled discreetly into their ears. On their belts, the glint of steel and the unmistakable seal of the United States Marshals Service. The courtroom falls into a stunned, breathless silence. Even Judge Vance is frozen, his gavel held aloft, his mouth slightly agape. This is an intrusion. An invasion. This is not part of his script. One of the marshals strides forward, his steps measured and heavy. He moves with a purpose that makes the local bailiffs look like amateur security guards. He carries a sealed manila folder. He doesn't look at the judge. He doesn't look at the prosecutor. He walks directly to the bar, stops, and looks at Maya Jackson. Assistant United States Attorney Jackson, the marshal says, his voice a low, professional baritone that commands instant respect. We have the warrants you requested. They have all been signed and executed by a federal magistrate. He places the folder on the railing in front of her. Time seems to stop. The air crackles. Every person in the room is trying to process the words they just heard. Assistant. United States. Attorney. Jackson. Maya gives the marshal a slight, almost imperceptible nod. She then does something that electrifies the entire room. She reaches up to the collar of her simple, unassuming dress and unbuttons the top button. With a smooth, practiced motion, she shrugs it off. Underneath, she is not wearing a blouse. She is wearing the crisp, white, collared shirt and sharp, perfectly tailored blazer of a federal prosecutor. The simple dress was a shell, a costume. And the play is now over. She walks past the bar, an invisible barrier that no longer applies to her, and approaches the prosecutor's table. Marcus Thorne, the snickering jackal, scrambles out of his chair as if it were on fire, backing away from her. Maya places her worn leather briefcase on the table and clicks it open. She doesn't look at the judge yet. She is taking control of the space, remaking the kingdom in her own image. She arranges a few files on the table with deliberate precision. Then, she turns. She looks up at the men on the bench. The men who mocked her, belittled her, and threatened her. Her expression is no longer serene. It is the calm, dispassionate face of justice itself. The southern drawl is still there, but now it is not the sound of a folksy outsider. It is the sound of righteous fury, of a reckoning long overdue. Arthur Vance, she says, her voice ringing with an authority that eclipses his own. You have the right to remain silent. After the things I have heard you say in this room today, I would strongly advise you to use it. She lets the words hang in the dead silent room. For the record, she continues, her voice clear and unwavering, my name is Maya Jackson. I graduated summa cum laude from Harvard Law. For the past decade, I have served in the Department of Justice's Public Integrity Section. And for the last 6 months, I have been the lead prosecutor on Operation Clean Gavel, a federal investigation into judicial corruption, bribery, and civil rights violations in this district. And you, sir, you are its primary target. The color drains from Judge Arthur Vance's face. It is a shocking transformation. The ruddy, arrogant complexion turns a pasty, sickly white. The sneer collapses into a slack-jawed gape of disbelief. The booming voice that terrorized hundreds is gone, replaced by a pathetic, strangled squeak. What, who, you can't, he stammers, his eyes wide with a terror so profound it is almost pitiable. He looks from Maya to the marshals, then back to Maya. He is a king who has just realized his throne is made of kindling and his crown is made of paper. The power dynamic has not just shifted, it has been inverted with the force of a tectonic plate. His kingdom has fallen. And this woman with the soft voice he so casually mocked, is standing on the rubble, holding the flag of a power far greater than his own. Maya picks up the folder the marshal delivered. It is thick with the weight of his sins. She opens it and begins to speak, her voice a clinical, dispassionate instrument of his unmaking. She is no longer addressing a judge. She is reading the eulogy of a corrupt man's career. Let's begin with the indictment, she says, her eyes scanning the first page. Grand Jury Indictment 74-2, filed this morning under seal in the United States District Court. Count 1, bribery, in violation of Title 18, United States Code, Section 201 inch. She looks up from the page, her gaze pinning Vance to his high-backed chair. This pertains to the zoning variance for the Miller construction project downtown. In exchange for a favorable ruling that rezoned protected wetlands for commercial development, you received a payment of $250,000. The payment was funneled through a shell corporation, Vance Holdings, registered in the Cayman Islands. A corporation, I might add, registered in your wife's maiden name. She gestures to the large courtroom monitor, which flickers to life. On the screen, a crystal-clear image of a bank transfer document appears. The names, the dates, the amounts, all of it laid bare for the entire court to see. Vance's breathing becomes ragged. A thin sheen of sweat breaks out on his forehead. Count 2, Maya continues, her voice relentless. Conspiracy to commit obstruction of justice. This pertains to the 2018 case of Maria Flores, a case you presided over. The prosecution's key evidence was a smudged fingerprint. The defense had DNA evidence that would have exonerated their client. You ordered your court clerk, a Mr. David Chen, to lose that evidence report. Mr. Chen, I should mention, has provided federal investigators with a sworn affidavit to that effect. He is a cooperating witness. In the gallery, a man in his late 50s, the court clerk, puts his head in his hands and begins to quietly sob, a sound of relief and terror all at once. Count 3, racketeering, Maya says, turning a page. It seems you've been running this courtroom less like a hall of justice and more like a mob boss's headquarters. For years, you have used a select group of attorneys, including, she pauses, turning her head slowly to look at the trembling prosecutor, Mr. Marcus Thorne over there, to shake down defendants. For a price, charges could be reduced. For a higher price, they could disappear entirely. We have detailed financial records. We have testimony from 3 of the attorneys you worked with. They have all been offered plea agreements in exchange for their full cooperation. Marcus Thorne lets out a horrified gasp. He looks at Vance, his face a mask of betrayal, and then he points a shaking finger. He made me do it. It was all his idea. I'm a victim here, he shrieks, his composure shattering into a million pieces. Quiet. Vance bellows, a pathetic echo of his former power. He glares at Thorne, his eyes promising a retribution he is no longer capable of delivering. Then, he turns his fury on Maya. The terror is momentarily replaced by a desperate, sputtering rage. This is a setup. A political hit job, he screams, his voice cracking. He bangs his gavel on the bench, but the sound is weak, hollow. It is the sound of a falling king. You tricked me. You came in here with your folksy little accent, your cheap dress, playing the part of some backwoods simpleton. It was a lie. An entrapment. Maya allows a small, cold smile to touch her lips for the first time. It wasn't a lie, Mr. Vance. This accent is my birthright. This dress is what I wear on my day off. And my only act was allowing you to believe that your own prejudice was a reliable tool of judgment. You did not see a lawyer. You saw a black woman from the South and you filled in the rest with your own bigotry. You entrapped yourself. She lets that sink in before delivering the final, devastating blow. And finally, she says, her voice dropping, becoming graver, while judicial corruption is a federal crime, the Department of Justice takes a particularly dim view of civil rights violations. Your conduct on the bench has displayed a pattern of racial bias that is not just unethical, it is unconstitutional. It is a cancer on the very idea of American justice. And in the case of the young man you just threatened, Mr. David Carter. She reaches into her briefcase and pulls out a small digital audio recorder. She places it on the prosecutor's table. You see, we knew you had a habit of making inappropriate calls from your chambers. We secured a federal warrant to monitor those calls weeks ago. This is a recording of a conversation you had 2 nights ago with Judge Lawrence Peterson from the neighboring county. She presses a button. Vance's voice fills the courtroom. It is not the booming, authoritative voice of the bench. It is a conspiratorial, ugly voice, laced with liquor and hate. Yeah, another one of them, his recorded voice says, followed by a coarse laugh. Carter. The public defender is some new girl, probably top of her class at some liberal arts college, thinks she can save the world. I'm going to make an example of this boy, Larry. I don't care what evidence she brings. I'm going to bury him under the jail. Teach them all a lesson about who runs the city. The recording is filled with racial slurs, each one a hammer blow against his character, each one a nail in his legal coffin. The recording ends. An absolute, profound silence descends upon the courtroom. It is the silence of a tomb. The sound of a man's entire life, his reputation, his power, being utterly and irrevocably destroyed. There is nowhere to run. There is no defense. There is only the ugly, naked truth, broadcast for all to hear. The 2 U.S. Marshals, who had been standing impassively at the side, begin to move. They walk toward the bench with a slow, deliberate purpose. They ascend the 2 steps that lead to Vance's throne. Vance watches them approach, his face a grotesque mask of horror. His body is trembling uncontrollably. No, he whispers. No. Get away from me. This is my court. I am the law here. Arthur Vance, one of the marshals says, his voice devoid of emotion. You are under arrest for violations of federal law. Please step down from the bench. I will not. Vance shrieks, gripping the sides of his chair. You have no authority here. The marshals do not argue. They do not negotiate. One places a firm hand on Vance's shoulder, the other on his arm. With surprising ease, they lift the sputtering, resisting man from his seat of power. He is shockingly frail without his authority to hold him up. One of the marshals turns back to the empty chair. He takes the black judicial robe, the symbol of Vance's tyranny, and drapes it over the back. It hangs there, empty and meaningless. A hollow shell. They escort him down from the bench and into the well of the court, the very space where he had passed judgment on so many others. They turn him around and, with a series of sharp, metallic clicks, handcuff his hands behind his back. The public humiliation is absolute. He stands there, a prisoner in the center of his own fallen kingdom, in front of the jury box he stacked, the gallery he terrorized, the flags he dishonored. As they begin to lead him away, a broken, sputtering mess of a man, he turns his head, his eyes wild and filled with a venomous hatred, locking on Maya one last time. You will pay for this, he hisses. Maya looks at him, not with triumph, not with anger, but with a kind of weary pity. Her voice is calm, the southern drawl a soft but powerful current carrying her final words to him. You were right about one thing, Mr. Vance, she says, her voice carrying easily through the silent room. We do speak the king's English in this courtroom. But we also speak the language of the Constitution. A language it seems you've long forgotten. She pauses, letting the weight of the moment settle. Enjoy learning the language of a federal penitentiary. I hear it's a difficult one to master. Then, she turns her back on him, a final, complete dismissal. She walks over to the defense table where David Carter sits, stunned into immobility, tears streaming down his face. Sarah Jenkins is conscious now, being tended to by a bailiff, watching the scene unfold with wide, disbelieving eyes. Maya places a gentle hand on David's shoulder. "Mr. Carter," she says, her voice now soft, all the steel gone, replaced by a profound and gentle kindness. "On the authority of the United States Department of Justice, the state's case against you is hereby dismissed with prejudice. All charges are dropped. You are a free man." David Carter puts his head down on the table and sobs, not with despair, but with the overwhelming, earth-shattering relief of a man who has been pulled back from the abyss. The kingdom of Arthur Vance is no more. And in its place, for the first time in a very long time, there is justice. The fallout was not merely a consequence, it was a cleansing fire. The legal and political edifice that Arthur Vance had built over 3 decades of corruption was dismantled, brick by rotten brick, with a brutal and satisfying efficiency. Arthur Vance, stripped of his title, his power, and his dignity, was no longer judge. He was federal inmate number 77821. He refused a plea deal, clinging to a delusional belief that his connections would save him. They did not. His allies scattered like rats from a sinking ship. At his trial, a parade of his former cronies, including the sniveling Marcus Thorne, testified against him in exchange for leniency. The audio recording of his racist rant was played for a jury that sat in stunned silence. He was found guilty on all 17 counts of the federal indictment. The sentencing judge, a stern woman flown in from another district to ensure impartiality, looked down at the now gaunt, white-haired Vance and delivered a sentence that was both a punishment and a statement. He was sentenced to 30 years in a federal supermax prison, with no possibility of parole. His judicial pension was seized. His assets were frozen and liquidated, with a significant portion directed into a victims' compensation fund. He was disbarred, his name physically chiseled off the courthouse dedication plaque. His ruin was not just professional, it was historical. He was erased. Marcus Thorne, for his cooperation, received a sentence of 8 years in a medium-security facility. He was disbarred and disgraced, a permanent footnote in the story of Vance's downfall. The police chief implicated in the evidence tampering scheme received 15 years. Dozens of other city officials, court employees, and attorneys in Vance's orbit were either prosecuted or forced to resign in disgrace. The entire corrupt ecosystem was poisoned at the root, and it withered and died. But for every villain who fell, a hero rose. David Carter received a formal apology from the city and the state, along with a multi-million-dollar settlement for wrongful prosecution and emotional distress. It was one of the largest such settlements in the state's history. But David did not disappear into a life of quiet wealth. He used the money to create the Carter Justice Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to providing top-tier legal resources to the wrongly accused in underserved communities. He enrolled in college, majoring in pre-law, his experience having forged in him an unshakable desire to fight for others as Maya had fought for him. Sarah Jenkins, the public defender who had buckled under Vance's tyranny, found her calling renewed. Maya saw in her a fierce but battered spirit. She offered Sarah a position as a junior prosecutor in the newly reformed United States Attorney's Office for the district. Sarah accepted without hesitation. Freed from the oppressive weight of the old system, she blossomed into a formidable and compassionate prosecutor, known for her meticulous preparation and her unwavering ethical compass. She and Maya became a powerful team, ensuring the new era of justice was not just a temporary change but a permanent one. And Maya Jackson, the woman with the gentle Southern voice and the iron will, became a legend in the Department of Justice. Operation Clean Gavel was hailed as a landmark case, a textbook example of how to dismantle systemic corruption. She was promoted to a senior leadership position, given oversight of a special task force responsible for investigating judicial misconduct across the entire country. She did not lose her accent, if anything, it became more pronounced, a badge of honor, a reminder to the arrogant and the powerful that justice can come from anywhere, in any voice, and that underestimating it is a fatal mistake. The systemic changes were profound. Maya's investigation triggered a full-scale review of every major case Vance had presided over in the last 20 years. As a result, more than 50 convictions were overturned. Men and women who had lost years of their lives to his biased rulings were exonerated and released, their families weeping with joy on the courthouse steps where they had once wept with sorrow. The court itself was reformed from top to bottom. New ethics rules were implemented. A civilian oversight committee was established. The very air in the building seemed to change, from one of fear to one of accountability. 2 years later. The courtroom is the same, and yet it is entirely different. The dark, imposing mahogany has been cleaned, and sunlight now streams through the tall windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air like tiny sparks of hope. The atmosphere is not one of dread, but of quiet, respectful order. On the bench sits a new judge, an African-American woman with a kind but firm demeanor, who listens intently to the arguments before her. In the gallery, 3 figures sit together. Maya Jackson, dressed in one of her signature sharp suits, looks on with a quiet sense of satisfaction. Beside her is Sarah Jenkins, no longer trembling, but poised and confident, observing the proceedings with a prosecutor's critical eye. And next to Sarah is David Carter, home from college for the summer, wearing a suit that fits him perfectly, a legal textbook resting in his lap. He is not just watching, he is studying. He is learning the shape of his future. After the session, the 3 of them walk out onto the courthouse steps, into the bright afternoon sun. "He's doing well," Sarah says, nodding back toward the courtroom. The new public defender. "He's sharp." "He is," Maya agrees. "Because he knows he'll get a fair hearing. That's all the difference in the world." David looks up at the inscription carved into the stone above the entrance, "Equal justice under law." For the first time, it doesn't feel like a lie. "I got my LSAT scores back," David says quietly. Maya and Sarah both turn to him, their faces lighting up. "And?" Maya asks, a proud, almost maternal smile on her face. David breaks into a wide grin. "Let's just say," he says, his voice full of a confidence he never knew he had, "Harvard might be getting an application from a kid from the East Side." Maya laughs, a full, joyous sound that echoes on the steps. She puts an arm around David's shoulders and another around Sarah's, pulling them into a half-hug. They stand there for a moment, a trinity of resilience, a testament to the change they have wrought. Arrogance is a rot. It hollows out a person from the inside, leaving behind nothing but a brittle shell of pride. Judge Arthur Vance believed his power was absolute, his kingdom eternal. He forgot that power derived from a title is borrowed, and power derived from fear is fleeting. He looked at Maya Jackson and David Carter and saw not people, but symbols of his own superiority. He dismissed their voices, their heritage, their very humanity, and in doing so, he sealed his own fate. He learned the hard way that the law, when wielded by those with courage and conviction, is not a sword for the strong to oppress the weak. It is a shield. And sometimes, it is a mirror, forcing the powerful to gaze upon the ugliness of their own souls just before it shatters them completely. The voice you mock today may be the very one that reads your sentence tomorrow.